Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to come from the 11th chapter in the book of Hebrews. Herein, the author expounds on the meaning of faith. And faith can be defined in dictionary form. It is the composite of several interchangeable ingredients. The specific nature of those items we may delve on more extensively as the discourse develops. But for now, it suffices to say that faith is better understood as experiential knowledge than abstract or dictionary knowledge. And there are several examples throughout the scriptures which provide us a model of faith to emulate. And the author of Hebrews in this chapter goes through the roster of luminaries from the Old Testament. Remember, he was writing to Jewish, recently converted Christians with Jewish backgrounds, compelling them to embrace the new and superior covenant. But he doesn't outright tell them to discard the old, because the new is very much rooted in the old, and there's a lot we can learn from them in any dispensation. So the opening verse reads, "And faith is the substance of what is expected, the proof of what is not seen." So the faith our faith is manifest in scriptures throughout the promises of divinity, which tax the faith. So even though we can't see them or grasp them or behold them immediately, we have faith that they will manifest and materialize, if not in our lives, then certainly in the next. But seeing without believing is not, strictly speaking, faith. That constitutes mere superstition. Faith involves more complex ingredients than merely believing without seeing. "For by this the elders obtained witness." So faith is foundational to witnessing throughout the ages, and the principle remains inviolate in any age. We are evangelists of the faith, ergo we are to be rooted, our witnesses to be rooted in faith, and our witnesses to be an expression of faith. "By faith we understand that the ages were prepared by the word of Yahweh, so that what is seen was not made of what is visible." So in the creation process, Yahweh simply spoke the universe into existence. He said, "Let there be light," and it was. It was seriously that simple. And this, everything that is visible owes its origin to an immaterial and invisible creator who gives, from whom all existence derives. "By faith Abel offered to Elohim a greater sacrifice offering than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, Elohim witnessing of his gifts. And through it, having died, he still speaks." So Cain and Abel were the original brothers. They were the offspring of Adam and Eve, our most primordial human ancestors. And in the 4th chapter of Genesis, we read that Abel, who was a shepherd, provided Yahweh with a superior sacrifice in the form of blood of his sheep, whereas Cain, who was a farmer and a tiller, offered an inferior sacrifice of vegetables, and this provoked the divine favor, provoked the wrath in Cain, who slew his brother in the open field. But Abel ultimately survives as an example, and even though he was dead, he still speaks. So the faith we exercise in this life will outlive us and outlast us. "But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to Elohim has to believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek them." Now, the key word in that passage, as I see it, is diligently. So we're not only to seek him, but we are instructed how to seek him. That is diligence, which is laborious by implication. So a lot of people expect to encounter the divine presence immediately, but it comes through a process of trial and error through which we learn from our mistakes, and it's impossible to please Elohim without faith, who is the object of our faith. And we have to affirm his existence, but that's the minimal mandatory of faith. An intellectual assent to the existence of deity is not true worship or true faith, but he will reward those who seek him diligently. "By faith Noah, having been warned of what was yet unseen, having feared, prepared an ark to save his house, through which he condemned the world, and became heir of the righteousness, which is according to faith." So Noah was instructed to construct an ark for the rainstorm which was to come and eradicate all living life forms off the face of the earth. Noah was spared because he was righteousness, and God saw in him a fit progenitor for the human race. Now, the scions of, he was preserved from the righteous remnant of Seth, who was very much Adam and Eve's replacement for Abel, but the seed of Cain were ineradicably wiped out. And he may have looked foolish to his world, because we have to keep in mind that rain, the existence of rain, its original manifestation was in fact the flood. In Genesis 2:4, we read that the water was refreshed and the ground was watered from the ground. So it didn't fall from the sky, but it replenished itself through the underground. And even though he condemned, the world was laughing at him, but they weren't left to laugh at him when it was all said and done. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he was about to receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. So in the Abrahamic calling, which launches the dispensation of promise in Genesis 12:1-3, he's instructed to pack all his things and leave the country he was familiar with. He was a citizen of Ur, which was an ancient city in Mesopotamia, and he was instructed to live as a wandering Aramaean, and he was to lead a nomadic existence from the comfortable life of a settled person in civilization. And even though he didn't know where he was going, he had faith in the promise, and eventually his progeny claimed the promise. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as a stranger, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. So the Abrahamic promise was vested in Isaac, who was the son of his wife Sarah, and Ishmael was the son that he had sired when, by permission of his wife, he ceded her Egyptian maidservant Hagar to his bed, and they sired Isaac. And Jacob was the younger twin brother of Esau, who was Isaac's favorite, but Yahweh's favorite was Jacob, because he saw in him. Isaac simply liked Esau because he was a prolific hunter and fed him tasty meat, but Jacob had more spiritual substance. For he was looking for the city having foundations, whose builder and maker is Elohim. So Yahweh's creative magnificence is to be found in the new heaven and new earth, the heavenly city, and it's designed by him and inhabited by him. And this is the ultimate promise of our faith, is an eternal existence in the divine fellowship in heaven. By faith also, Sarah herself was enabled to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the normal age, because she deemed him trustworthy who had promised. Now, Sarah actually struggled with faith in the promise. She was well past the childbearing age, and she was distraught because she had not mothered any children. Yet, through a miraculous manifestation, she was able to conceive Isaac well past the childbearing age. But Isaac translates as laughter, because when she was initially told by the angel that she would conceive the child of promise, she responded in laughter, and then she denied it. But all in all, and on the whole, she was faithful, even though she had her moment of doubt. Moments of doubt are mere moments, and they are incidental. They are detours, not defeats, for the saints who walk on the straight and narrow. And so from one, and him as good as dead, were born as numerous as the stars of the heavens, as countless as the sands which is by the seashore. So one of the promises that Yahweh gave Abraham is to look on the stars of the heaven, that's how numerous his descendants would be, and to look on the sand on the seashore. And the idea being whether he looked up or down, he would have a constant reminder of the promise he would claim. And there are to date 14 million Jews. 6 million of them were recently wiped out in the Holocaust. But they are clearly a historically prominent nation, and they have exerted a tremendous impact on civilization and history. And they came from one loin, and they were from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, who sired the 12 patriarchs or tribal patriarchs of Israel. In faith, all these died, not having received the promises, but seeing them from a distance, welcomed and embraced them, and confessed that they were aliens and strangers on the earth. So in previous dispensations, in the antediluvian, the dispensation and the dispensation of promise, they had not concrete expectations of the eternal life in heaven or the avenue of the atonement through which it would claim. Yet the Father rewards the faithful in proportion to the knowledge which they have, and if they act on that accordingly. So with all the knowledge at their disposal, all the revelation, they utilized it, they made the most of it, and believed in things they could not see. And aliens and strangers, now that means that saints are out of their natural environment on the earth we inhabit. The world seems strange to us, and we seem strange to the world. Hence, we are aliens and strangers. And I think Peter comments on this in one of his epistles. For those who speak this way made it clear that they seek a home country. And yet, if they had indeed kept remembering that from which they had come out, they would have had the chance to return. But now they long for a better, that is, of the heavens. Therefore Yahweh is not ashamed to be called their Elohim, for he has prepared a city for them. So the city we are alluded to in Revelation 21, the new Jerusalem and the new earth, he's going to... now there's no scholarly consensus as to whether he will destroy the old earth or simply replenish it through an act of renewal. But what we do know with certainty is that it'll be new and grand and unlike anything we can see or imagine. And when John describes the city in the book of Revelation, he frequently uses the word like, because there is no... he couldn't quite describe exactly what it was, but he used relatable, familiar objects such as semi-precious jewels to communicate what was unrelatable. By faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promise offered up his only begotten son. So this was an allusion, the typology of which was an implicit, alluded to the sacrifice of the son who was sent to the earth to die for the sins out of the great love of the Father. And Isaac was very much a species of treasury in his esteem. He had waited his whole life for a son of promise that had been promised him, and he received it, but he harbored an idolatrous inclination towards the child of promise, so much so that Yahweh, in order to instruct him to forsake the idol, had him take him to the sacrifice prepared for him, and a ram was intervened. An angelic intervention placed a ram in Isaac's stead at the last minute, but he did prove his faith by going all the way and obeying and honoring the command of Elohim without question, and he didn't fully understand the purpose, but he accepted it. Of who it was said, "In Isaac your seed shall be called." So Abraham sired many children. He had Isaac, and he also sired the nation of Midian through a third wife of his. But it was in Isaac whom the chosen people and the promise was endowed. And through his seed, Abraham's descendants would bless all the world. And it was ultimately the singular seed of the Messiah who was one of his descendants. Reckoning that Elohim was able to raise, even from the dead, from which he received him back as a type. So type we understand to be an abbreviated term of typology, so we already explained that the cherished, beloved, and only begotten son, who was highly treasured and esteemed by Abraham, he was called to sacrifice him, much in the same way Yahweh would do with his own son Yahshua. By faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning what was to come. Now, Jacob, the name translates as trickery or deceiver, and he used deception to claim the promise which was vested in his brother Esau, who, remember, was his father's favorite. But he was short of sight, and Esau went to hunt for him, and Isaac's mother, Rebecca, Isaac's wife, Rebecca, who favored Jacob, gave him meat which would taste like what Esau was hunting, and they took advantage of his father's deficiency in sight. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, and did reverence on the top of his staff. So we read of this in Genesis 49. There's a lot of theologically significant material in that chapter. Among other things, the promised Messiah is identified as coming from the seed of Judah. So in that tribe, even though Joseph was the outstanding son of Jacob, and his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, would rise to prominence in the northern kingdom of Israel, so much so that it was referred to as Ephraim. By faith, Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the outgoing of the children of Israel, and gave orders concerning his bones. So Jacob wanted to be buried in the land of promise, and for 400 years, the nation of Israel grew as a nation within a nation in Egypt, and for the greater majority of that time period, they were enslaved. But they still had the promise, and they did manifest, and we're going to pick up on that eventually in another lesson. Thank you so much. Tune in next time. Bye-bye.